Pomni has changed significantly since the pilot. From being someone near everyone had categorized as this poor scared little baby seconds away from cracking, she's somehow developed into this very real, very strong person who is more than capable of handling herself when push comes to shove. But what's so interesting about this evolution to me is that most of it comes from Pomni simply getting to show us more facets of herself with each new installment, which isn't to say she hasn't had any personal growth, far from it, and we'll get to that. What I'm trying to say is that our original perception of her wasn't honestly, well, fair, and that I actually think that the show had always intended to set us up, to prove us wrong about her as a narrative point. So today I want to establish who the real Pomni even is, the point of her character, and why I believe she is the perfect protagonist for this show. Now, what you might notice when thinking back to the pilot is that we're not given a whole lot to go on about Pomni. This is because the plot doesn't have her do much else other than react. And I mean, what else could she do besides react? She finds out about her horrible situation, immediately gets chased by a monster, and then gets distracted by trying to find the exit. At no point does she ever get the opportunity to do something that decisively tells us how she behaves normally. Even her decision to abandon Regatha was under duress and biased. However, despite us not getting to learn much about her, we're forced to make a snap judgment of Pomni anyway. And in hindsight, isn't it hilarious how many of us took certain behaviors Pomni had exhibited in the pilots and just ran with them? There was some truth to her being a cautious, easily flustered person, but it was definitely taken a bit too far. Like, oh, she immediately freaked out at being stuck in virtual reality and that she couldn't leave? She must be in a constant state of fear. She was going nuts over not being able to find the exit. She must be completely kooky. Okay, I mean, that expression didn't help that interpretation, did it? Still, the point stands. I guarantee you most people would be the same had they been put in Pomni's clown shoes. Her actions aren't really unique to any one personality type, and yet many of us assumed we had her all figured out, or simply got attached to this first impression of her. But as I touched upon in the intro, I believe that we're in fact meant to fit her into a box for the show to later dismantle. Why do I believe this? Well, let me jump the shark and tell you what I believe the thesis of the show is. There's more to humans than what's on the surface. Now, I'm aware that's an extremely loaded take, so please let me try and win you back with another still loaded, yet slightly more palatable take that you'll likely have an easier time understanding where I'm coming from with. Jax's idea that all the other humans in the Circus are simple character archetypes is the show's antithesis. A lot of people were able to pick up on the fact that in episode 6, every single person had contradicted the labels Jax had assigned them at the start of the episode, Jax even disproving the one he assigned himself. However, if you dig even deeper, it's not just scenes in this episode that shatter this narrow-minded view. In fact, every single episode thus far, sans maybe the first, which sets the whole thing up, has the focal point be showing us that these characters are deeper than they appear. And to be clear, Pomni is not the only character that the show sets up her expectations for. All of the characters seemingly have very archetypal personalities, and matching designs to boot. If Jax had shared his belief with us in the pilot, we probably wouldn't think his idea was so crazy. It's only because the show systematically shows us what's going on in the minds of these people that we can easily see he's talking nonsense. However, Pomni stands out among the cast for two big reasons. The first being that she is the most human looking out of all of the avatars. She has no incredibly noticeable gimmick, and extreme anthropomorphism to the point of essentially looking no different to a human. As the main character, that makes her a great audience surrogate. As discussed, in the first episode she behaves in ways most people would, so I think it's safe to say that this is intentional. I mean, she was a frog at some point. The second is that, unlike the rest of the cast, her avatar doesn't give away anything too obvious about her, to our knowledge at this point in time at least, but we'll get back to that much later. For now, back to the whole thesis thing. In episode 2, we're introduced to this NPC, Gummigoo. His whole deal, as you may recall, is that he discovers he is in fact just that, an NPC, that his entire life is a lie, and goes on to have an existential crisis about who he really is. His first thought is that he's nothing, and that everything is meaningless. However, Pomni goes on to explain to him how she can relate to feeling like nothing, and that even in a real world, this is a very normal experience.
Feeling like you're nothing is kind of normal. I mean, people even feel like that in the world I came from.
Here, Pomni finally gets to show a lot more of herself. She's empathetic, kind, and actually quite the realist. But moreover, we discover how she might feel about herself, that she's nothing. This is the first time we see someone have a very negative image of themselves, but it would soon become a major recurring theme for everyone else in the circus. And of course, on Gummy's side, we learn despite being artificial that AIs are fully capable of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and of forming connections. The empathy Pomni has for his situation in this episode is in direct opposition to Jax's cruel treatment of them, killing them off for entertainment and clearly seeing them as nothing more than automatons. So, to put it clearly, we have the show saying AIs are complex beings, while Jax believes there's nothing to them. And you'd have a hard time convincing me this doesn't foreshadow what we learn about Jax in episode 6. Although Gummy Goo isn't human per se, I think he represents how even the people you don't think much about still live their own lives. And that's not even the only thing this episode has to say about the importance of getting to know people. Pomni starts the episode having a dream about abstracting, with everyone just watching and laughing at her for not being able to cut it. Because she doesn't know them, she assumes they're out to get her. However, these people hosting a funeral for Kaufmo, and her learning from Gummy Goo that you can't judge people without getting to know them, she winds up humanizing them and seeing them as her friends. And the next episode would push Pomni to understand people without letting preconceived notions about them get in the way even more, as she's forced to spend her time in Mildenhall Manor with Kinger. It turns out that while he is paranoid and out of pocket on a normal day, when in darkness he gains a surprising amount of clarity. And as it turns out, the person inside of the chess piece is this very wise, loving person who's harbouring a lot of grief over the passing of his wife. And then we have Zubul, who, despite presenting as a tough nut to crack, turns out to be rather vulnerable. Their parts gimmick may look cool and pretty to us, but to them it's a source of immense body dysphoria, which needless to say, causes them relentless suffering. It's really no wonder why they're so grumpy all the time. With the way the pair of them had been presented in the first 2 episodes, it was all too easy to have written them off as just being crazy and angry respectively like Jax did. Again, quite literally, all of these episodes are about dismantling the expectations these characters had foisted upon them by both us and Jax. And of course we can't skip over Pomni's role in this episode. While she is indeed frightened most of her time in the manor, she continues to defy her expectations here. In spite of everything that could go wrong going wrong, she somehow manages to power through every step of the way, in part thanks to Kinger's support, and never once does she let her fear get the better of her. And from feeling like nothing in the last episode, Kinger tells her something likely very cathartic.
You're very strong, Pomni. And I know you'll be able to get through this.
And it's here where things really start to fall into place for me. It's not only us or even Jax who had such narrow-minded reads of these people at first. These people can't see their own value. They underestimate themselves. It's not until Kinger encourages her that she even thinks she can hold her breath for more than a few seconds. And for those with extreme avatar gimmicks like Zubul, seeing themselves for who they truly are becomes even harder. Though it's perhaps episode 4 that exemplifies how the avatars work against them most. It's almost all about Gangle, her view of herself, and how others view her. I don't think I need to elaborate too much how this backs up my theory. The episode starts with Gangle breaking her comedy mask, but Zubul reveals they found one that they think might suit her better, especially considering it's plastic, which won't break as easily. So because she's wearing this new normal mask, she launches a new persona that's happy all the time, and who doesn't let anything bother her. This is extremely at odds with the person who she is on the inside, someone that's sad, timid, and overall a bit of a pushover. This means that it's incredibly hard for her to maintain. To make matters worse, everybody ends up hating this persona, even Ragatha, who usually acts as if nobody but Jax can do wrong. Although it's not technically her, this is soul-crushing all the same, as Gangle is behaving exactly how she'd be expected to behave as a manager, being work-oriented, keeping her employees in line, being normal, and it's still not enough for people. When she finally gets to clock out, at first she feels the euphoria of no longer having to maintain that mask. Not only that, but I believe she realized that acting as someone else isn't going to make people like her any better. But unfortunately, she's still not truly happy with herself, and life is still harder for her than so-called normal people. The reality of which hits her like a truck. Despite her masking, two people are able to see the person behind it, Zubul and Pomni. Of course, Zubul can relate intuitively because they aren't happy with themselves either. As for Pomni though, she's just incredibly empathetic as mentioned before, and she really wants to get to know and help people. It was the case for Gummigoo, Kinga, Gangle, and somehow even Jax in this episode, even if only for a brief moment. Which takes us to episode 5, where we find out that Jax too has a lot more going on for him than both the viewer and Pomni might be led to believe. While on the surface he might be abrasive, cruel, and not capable of taking anything seriously, he has a much softer side that he reveals to, once again, Pomni. He starts spilling his innermost feelings to her, and for once, tries to make somebody who isn't himself laugh.
Think we all look weird.
Excuse you, this is what peak male performance looks like. My ears and tail are kind of the pinnacle of masculinity.
Not only that, we learn he's harboring trauma from a friend he had in the past, whose door we see him stop and stare at during the intermission. But the real takeaway of the episode, that undeniably pertains to the whole being more than we appear thing, is the bar scene. Here, almost everyone reveals a bit about who they were in the real world, and I think all of them inform us that their issues had persisted before their time in the circus. Zubul has had 2 jobs, a bartender and tattoo artist respectively, and well, putting 2 and 2 together, they've probably had many more. This makes sense with them struggling to find something that fits. Gangle only ever worked in fast food, dropping out of graphic design in community college and abandoning her dreams. Not being neurotypical, she would have found college very hard, which likely impeded her self-confidence, which we know all too well is still a big issue for her. Ragatha comes from a wealthy family and worked in real estate, but had a troubled home life with her mother who would berate and guilt-trip her, more than explaining her people-pleasing tendencies. Pomni, though, might have the most interesting backstory of the lot, at least as far as it relates to the subject of our video. So it turns out that she'd get bored of her life and seek thrills exploring abandoned buildings, recording her ventures for YouTube but never garnering a crowd. This makes a lot of sense with how she talked about feeling like nothing before. Perhaps she feels like no one pays attention to her, or even actively underestimates her, but it also goes to show that even in her real life, she isn't just that scared of everything ball of anxiety you might take her for. In reality, she enjoys adventure and wants more out of life. Pomni may be cautious, but she isn't a coward. She may be easily rattled, but she's resilient. People may not notice what she does, but it doesn't mean she has nothing to give. I think these are all things she struggles tremendously to see about herself. It's very possible that she hasn't been told it enough, and that Kinga is the first person who has in a while. Perhaps even ever. However, her self-confidence is certainly growing. I mean, that's been her entire character arc. And in episode 6, we finally get to see her personal journey start to culminate. But first, here's a quick rundown of the concept I described earlier in the video. Jax explains to Pomni that he believes that they're all cartoon characters, and despite in the past thinking that they're still real humans like she currently does, they've fallen more and more into their archetypes as time has gone on. He goes on to describe Ragatha as the cheerful one, Kinga as the crazy one, Gangle as the sad one, Zubul as the grumpy one, and he doesn't have Pomni's figured out yet. And yes, the episode debunks this one by one, or more like 2 by 2. I won't be going into too much detail about this, seeing as many of you would have figured it out before watching, or already see where I'm going. The abridged version is that Ragatha reveals her self-loathing to Kinga, Kinga overcomes his memory issues to offer her sage advice, and Zubul cheers up Gangle with their empathy and love for her. However, that begs the question, what's the significance of Jax being unable to assign an archetype to Pomni? As both her own character and as an audience surrogate, Pomni represents a person who constantly changes and isn't fully knowable until you take the time to understand them. And just as you think you have her number, you learn something new about her. Jax is someone who is constantly learning new things about her because, whether he realizes it or not, he's actively trying to. Not quite being able to put a finger on who she is, it made him curious. And not having preconceived notions about her has made it so that, for the first time in a while, he was able to get close to someone. In other words, Pomni, who embodies the show's thesis, has been slowly infiltrating Jax's perspective, the antithesis. I certainly hope this makes more sense in context than when it did when I first proposed it, or I am cooked. Now, hoping that I somehow managed to make a point with all that waffling and you're still here, let's finally bring it all back to Pomni one last time. I'll just be blunt. Pomni is a total motherfucker fucking badass in this episode. While she starts off barely being able to aim her gun, awkwardly missing the center cup, she only needs to be told by Jax once that she's overthinking it to lock the fuck in. She winds up believing in herself so much, in fact, that she's able to manifest that complete bullshit shot at Zubul. And well, this is kind of the abridged version of her entire arc. She starts off not believing in herself at all, certainly not enough to think she can save Ragatha, or even hold her breath for longer than a few seconds. But through all her trials and tribulations, she barely has to be reminded now of the fact she's capable. In fact, by the end of the episode, she doesn't have to be reminded at all. While it may not be the most apparently uplifting moment ever, nothing thus far demonstrates Pomni's growth as well as her not letting Jax run away from his feelings again. Pomni has run away from scary situations before because she believed that she was helpless. But here, even if she knows that she might not be successful, she's giving it her all to fight for their friendship. However, I don't think Pomni was only upset because Jax was throwing their friendship away. Rather, I believe, as someone who would run when push comes to shove in the past, and as someone who's established to care greatly for others, she recognized someone running and didn't want them to suffer like she has, who only ran because they didn't believe in themselves. And that's why she makes the perfect protagonist for this show, which is so keen on asserting the complexity of humanity and the importance of connection. Pomni is this deeply empathetic, deeply caring person, and that's why she can act as a catalyst to the story where others can't. She's the only person here who can see everybody for who they truly are, even Jax. And it's not just Gummy Goo or Kinger or Jax or Gangle, it's Ragatha too, where most of the others look at Ragatha and see someone who's being disingenuous, only faking being nice so that she's liked, or because she doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Pomni's able to see that she's coming from a genuine place, that she truly just wants everyone to be happy, and the only reason that she forces her compassion on people so much is because she's so desperate for love and connection. This is why, despite fearing rejection and distancing herself, Pomni still wants to maintain that friendship. And when you think about it, that's the real message of the amazing digital circus, that you should always be nice to Ragatha. Like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts down below. See ya!